Hey guys, thanks for joining me on this journey of figuring out how we can better reflect God in all aspects of life through looking at things that I wish I had been taught. Today, I want to focus on the topic of relationships, both platonic and romantic. The reason I think this is so important is because when we look back at Deuteronomy chapter 6, we see the idea of passing things on to your children so that they can pass it on to their children from generation to generation and so forth. And one of the first things that we learn naturally as children from our parents is the idea of relationships and how to build relationships. We see this through the examples of how they approach friendships and romantic relationships with each other and their circle of peers. So let's start by talking about how we can reflect God and his characteristics through our platonic relationships, otherwise known as friendships. And I think the best place to start with this would be to look at what Jesus's relationships were like. So, how did he reflect God's characteristics in his relationships with, say, the apostles, or the woman at the well, or even the Pharisees? And so, when we look at Jesus interacting with others, we see that he was always uplifting of others. He always sought to give to others, whether it was giving of himself, his time, his skills, his wisdom, and especially his love. Jesus was also really honest with people and unselfish. And by that, I mean, he didn't approach his relationship with others with solely the mindset of thinking, what can I get out of this? Or, what's in it for me? Jesus was constantly trying to feed people and to pour into others, whether it was literally through the feeding of the thousands or pouring into others and feeding others spiritually or mentally or emotionally. Even when it came to those that tried to hurt him or stop what he was doing, he responded with humility and love, never any sort of malice or hatred. We also see that in the gospel recordings, Jesus thought it was important to take time away from his friends and his peers to rest, recharge, and to spend time alone with God. He was honest enough with himself and others to do this, to say, hey, I'm tired, I need a break. So I think that can show us that in order to pour into others and in order to give to others in our friendships and interactions, we also need to keep in mind when we may have to take time away and rest and let ourselves be filled. Because we can't give what we don't have. If we're constantly giving and giving and giving, eventually we reach a point where we can't give anymore. And so Jesus was aware of how he was feeling and where he was at emotionally, spiritually, physically, and mentally. And we can see that again when he plainly states being tired and being hungry and wanting to go off on his own to pray even. So take note of that and take this as an opportunity to start tuning into yourself better and being honest of where you're at so that you can better interact with others and better reflect who God is. For instance, if you made plans but later on realized that emotionally or mentally you just can't handle going out anymore that day, then know that it's okay to cancel and reschedule. And this practice is especially important when you're trying to manage mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and the like. But I believe that the most important thing Jesus said about his interactions and relationships with others are in the Gospel of John, chapters 8 and 14. Though he didn't directly state it in this way, Jesus says that if people had gotten to know him, they would have gotten to know the Father, God. Jesus was saying that he reflected God so perfectly through who he was that by knowing him, they could get to know God, and we can too. And I think that we can strive for that very same thing. Though it won't be done perfectly through us, we should be trying to help others get to know different aspects of God and who God is through their relationships with us. And I don't mean to make it sound so simple, but in a way, it really is that simple. We don't have to read through the entire Bible with someone, have them come to church with us, or even teach them all of our doctrines and beliefs in order for them to be able to know and understand a part of who God is. Jesus showed us the example of how others can get to know Him, God, and that is through ourselves, through our awareness and conscious efforts to reflect the characteristics of Himself that God has given to each and every one of us. This is because we were made to be relational beings. We long for connection all throughout life. And whether our interactions with others bring us trials or something to celebrate, we can look to Jesus and still be able to give thanks for it all, like it says in Philippians chapter 1, verse 3, because we're still striving to help others come to know God. And I know it's going to be hard sometimes because people are going to disappoint us and they're going to hurt us, just like they did with Jesus. But again, seek to imitate the way Jesus did with honesty and love, to therefore continue being that reflection of who God is. So take this with you today and meditate and reflect on how you can be that reflection of God to those around you through your friendships and your interactions with others, whether they're long-term friendships or short-term. But don't stop there. Put it into action and be that reflection of those unique characteristics of God that you were made to be. That way, when people get to know you, they can get to know a little bit more about our unfathomable and truly awe-inspiring God. Thank you. See you next time.